The Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As you may note, I'm filling in for Donna Mingle tonight. She called and said that her schedule was such that she couldn't make it this evening. So we'll proceed as follows. Tonight's meeting is our regularly scheduled work session. The meeting is being videotaped for community cable channels. Individuals attending this meeting and intending to speak to the board should be aware that they are being videotaped. In order to meet the requirements of the Pennsylvania Sunshine Law, it is necessary to record the names of all citizens who speak to the board during the meeting. To ensure compliance with this requirement, it is essential that those planning to address the board come to the microphone and state their name and address. Members of the audience are asked to limit their questions and comments to no more than 5 minutes. This limit will permit time for all those who wish to speak to the board. Whenever members of the audience exceed this time limit, the board president may ask the individual to yield the microphone to the next speaker. This is a reference to a board policy. I'd like to proceed on with the meeting at this time. I know most of you here are for the redistricting, and it's the first thing on the agenda. I want to make a slight change. I want to move some of the items that we can move through rapidly and bring those forward first, and then get to the redistricting as the final item. With that, the first item I'd like to bring forward is technology purchases, which is item 599. And you want to start that?
Sure.
Mr. Hatt.
On the agenda for discussion tonight is a request for the board to approve the purchase of 52 computers to be used in our school offices, specifically for building secretaries and principals. As you know, this was not part of the original technology plan. Mrs. Klein is here to update you if you need to know where we are specifically on the technology plan, but we're moving ahead and completing that. We did talk about offices last year, but our focus was to get technology into the hands of our students first. In the operating budget and technology, which is outside the plan, we did budget money for some consultants and also for replacement of equipment. And at this point, what we're saying is we would like to move ahead and start to replace that equipment in the offices. We have our secretaries and principals doing a lot of things in their offices manually. This would also allow them, we feel, more efficiency and effectiveness by being able to tap in better to our network system. They can do that now, but this new equipment would allow that to happen quicker, to access student records and check on things like discipline, attendance, etc. I think a few board members in their tours of the buildings have talked to some of the principals and realized that we need to upgrade them. So it's just a matter in my eyes, a question of when, and I think since we have this money in the operating budget now, we'd like to move ahead and make that recommendation.
Fine. Does the board have any, Debbie Klein's here tonight. Does anybody have any questions or?
I do.
Questions? Yes, Pat.
I'd just like to know, first of all, why we got a green sheet whether it's going to be for a committee first.
Well,
is there any reason why this didn't go before the committee?
Yes, Mrs. Klein brought this to me, I'd say sometime end of December, and when we looked at it, we talked about that and taking it to the Educational Services Committee at the end of January. One other thing we were looking at was trying to capitalize on an early dismissal that we have in early February, where we could most easily pull all the secretaries out of the building and be able to do a training session with them. So I was the one that decided to bring it ahead. Maybe I should have explained that in the green sheet, but I wanted to bring it ahead now and at least bring it in front of the board rather than try to wait an extra month and then try to pull secretaries out with substitute secretaries, etc.
Well, I just think that, to stay on top of things, and since we're working on a committee structure, we should be working through the committee. I understand what you're saying, but I still have a problem with the fact that it didn't go before committee first. And secondly, the money that you, was this part of the, what year was this part of the plan? Was it part of the second year of the plan, or
Well, we had,
third?
when we developed the budget.
I mean, obviously, you planned to bring this forward somewhere during the technology plan.
Right, and when
What
we
year was
developed,
this gonna fall in?
when we developed the budget last year,
Hold the mic closer to you, so everybody hears.
when I developed the budget last year, there wasn't the proper time, or enough time to properly analyze our needs at in the offices. So that was left, we had to wait until I had the time to do so. So now, things have settled in the schools, we've analyzed it. We'd like to build this into this year's plan and then carry it forward in year 2 and year 3, so I'll propose that later.
So this is still part of the first year
technology
plan?
First year.
First year?
What we're asking to, no, to
No.
clarify that, what we're asking to do
What I'm
is
trying to understand is that we passed the technology plan.
Right, and it was not
Mr. Hill
part
said
of year
last
one.
year that we were going to look at this on a year-to-year basis.
Correct.
And all we approved last year was year
Correct.
one of the plan. Now I'm asking, was this part of
Year 1 is.
year one plan?
No.
No.
Okay.
This would have been part of year 2 recommendation. We did want to replace some equipment, but as Mrs. Klein said, we didn't know where, and we wanted to take time and evaluate that. But we do have money in the general operating budget in our technology account that was not part of the plan.
And you don't feel that you'll need that money for what it was earmarked for?
No, because this will help to balance it. That money, some of that money I had budgeted for to replace some of the equipment that was wearing down. I'm looking at it now and saying, okay, we've analyzed this. Rather than replacing obsolete equipment, let's use our funds better and replace it with newer equipment. So this is part of 5 years, a 5-year plan to replace administrative equipment.
Okay, and I'm assuming that the cost you show here, which is a little over, well, about $15,000, we're lease purchasing or we're leasing this equipment, correct?
Correct.
Any other questions?
That's all I have, thank you.
You have a board member have questions? Yes.
Bob, you brought this up and said the time to train is gonna be a early dismissal in February. That's about, what, 3 hours? Training?
Approximately that, yeah.
You're gonna do that here, or you're gonna do that on site at a particular location?
I think there are two afternoons, I don't have my calendar.
There's two after, I'm sorry,
Two
there are 2 afternoons.
And we're still finalizing the final logistics.
The equipment they're gonna train on, is it gonna be installed in their locations before the training takes place?
Or right after.
How about the installation migrations? We had talked about taking some of the older equipment that's still usable and upgrading some of it and putting it in some places. And this was one of the areas where we thought migration was gonna happen because of the freedom we have in this particular location. Is that gonna happen here? I mean,
Yeah,
it looks like
very
you're
much
buying
so.
52 new computers.
When I analyzed what our needs were at the schools, we have approximately 175 office personnel district-wide. Of those, we created a migration path. About 52 were needed for this year new, and then we could bring up a number of 486s that we were migrating out of the labs and libraries that were not sufficient for the educational use, but would make good use here.
So
we're
this is only
requesting
52 of 170 pieces, and the rest are gonna be
Exactly.
migrated.
Exactly.
All right, the training, the software in particular that you're training them on, tell me what it is.
The Microsoft Office suite
Okay.
would be one piece of it.
Well,
Our Penimation
let me ask
system.
why, or let me tell you why I brought that up. We had issues before about having access in individual locations or outside this building for confidential information, security procedures and other things that we had concerns about. Right now, to get information on certain areas for employees or even students, it's accessed only through Dr. Robinson or Dr. Miller. Are you gonna tell me that now that we migrate some of this equipment out and we start to bring our offices online, they're gonna have the same type of access?
No, they have, the security is maintained by our Penimation system. That security will remain the same.
Is anybody gonna be able to access that from outside this building?
I'm not sure quite what our security rights are set up now. I don't believe so.
Well, that was a major issue
It
for the
depends on
technology
what
committee
information,
before.
what information are you asking about, I guess?
Personnel, student records.
No.
Bob said they were gonna access certain information. I wanna make sure
Only
we're
the,
talking about student
yeah,
records.
only information that they would
Student
normally
schedules,
have,
attendance.
attendance, scheduling, et cetera.
Stuff they're responsible for, but
Stuff
not
they're
particular
responsible
detail.
for, they would not have access to personnel records, et cetera, no.
When we talked about bringing the individual offices online, we said that there would be some type of a savings somewhere. Have we calculated any of that out yet?
I don't understand when we.
Well,
were
right now we do it
doing-
manually. We said things around building to building in packets. Now we're gonna be electronic.
No,
We're
it
not
was
gonna have a
good.
paper trail.
It was difficult for us to project that because some of that would be not so much a savings in terms of paper and whatnot. A lot of it was in terms of time. That now this frees people up to have more time interacting with the students and teachers. And that was difficult for me to project.
Do you, I'll ask this to Bob, probably is probably the better person to answer this. Do you foresee a change in the way we do elementary school office procedures? Right now, I think that most principals have either 2 secretaries or 2.5 secretaries, some kind of combination depending on the size of the location. Is that going to change?
I don't know that it would reduce it. I guess the way I look at it is I would have principals being able to do some of the other things that maybe they're spending too much time doing. Secretaries being more efficient and effective. I don't know that it would reduce our attendance secretary, but it would be something we would need to look at. Something we'll definitely look at as we implement this.
All right. The other issue just was, you said we're going to pay for this out of a technology account that we're had earmarked for something else?
It's called the Mrs. Klein's operating budget, and that was earmarked for upgrading some equipment, but also some consultants if we thought we needed them at this time.
Right. And just to let you know, currently most personnel at the schools access our Penimation system through dumb terminals, and it's on an antiquated network. That's what, rather than putting money in to replace and upgrade that system, we're saying let's put in new systems so we can take advantage of our new network and the offerings on our new network.
Thank you. No further questions?
Yes, Terry.
Suggestion, you said the training or the installation, the training would be probably shortly after. I don't know what you need to do to do this, and maybe you can't, but I would suggest that you have training after you install it. Let it be up for a week, let them play around with it. The questions when they come to training will be well thought out questions, and because they'll have a basic, they played around with it, they'll have a basic understanding and know where they really have real questions. That's all. I learned better that way.
Okay.
Tom, if I could, one more.
Yes, Pat.
Just piggybacking on what Vince said. In your letter, it said it will also provide the ability to share files with each other. What kind of files are we talking about?
A lot of the data that different, I think let's take the high school, for instance, the different home offices, rather than running that around to the different groups and maintaining that on paper, they can email things back and forth.
Or what kind of files?
We're not talking about students, and we're not talking about things that are confidential.
Oh, no,
And we-
just data and information.
We always work through the Pupil Services Office to make sure that we're abiding by what the confidentiality laws are. So it's not that type of a file.
Yeah, if I can, right now, if a guidance counselor at the high school was going to sit down with the student to review the student's records, his course selection, to do planning for colleges, career workshops, that type of thing, they have to go to actually 4 different locations to get all the information that they would have. And that information would include such things like student schedule, where the child has study hall so they could schedule it, those types of things. By having it on the Penimation system, they would be able to do that from their own office and can work with the kids directly right there in their office, eliminating that need to do all that paper legwork and paper trail with that type of thing. And that's one of the ways we would look at it. Certainly, there are concerns about confidentiality, and I think and Deb and I have talked a little bit about whatever we put on there, we need to make sure is in line with our confidentiality policies and procedures.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any board members have questions? Hearing none, is there anyone in the community have any questions relative to this item? Seeing none, I'll move along to the next item, which is, I'd like to cover is the alternative education program. Dr. Haskell, you want to bring up that?
Sure. I'll turn this over to Mr. Rajnak, but what I'd like to do is clarify something. On Friday, when we had our early dismissal, as I was listening to the radio, just to make sure the announcements got on, happened to listen to the show on the radio station, and it was a call-in show, and actually the topic was vocational education. But a parent from North Penn did call in regard to the alternative ed program and had some misconceptions. Based on a newspaper article she read, she was under the impression that the alternative ed program that we're talking about would, number one, bring back all the students that currently we have placed somewhere else. That's not necessarily true. And second of all, probably more importantly, she was under the impression that the alternative ed program would take spots away from students at our vocational technical school, or would, in her eyes, bringing students back to North Penn, be integrating them into the regular education. It's just the opposite. What we're talking about doing is an alternative ed program that would be run in the evening, that would deal with the students who either have a record of many absences or discipline records that we feel that we need an alternative placement for. So it's just the opposite. I wanted to call in, but I didn't think it was my show to call in since it was about vocational ed, but that's why it's good for me not to have the radio on during the day.
It's anonymous, though, Bob.
But for some more detail on this program, I'll turn it over to Mr. Rajnak.
Just to refresh your memories, what we did in August of this year, we applied to the Safe Schools Initiative to receive a grant in order to operate an after-school hours alternative education program. The board granted that approval. We went ahead and applied for the grant. The grant was for a sum of $39,500. We also established a alternative education task force in order to study what alternative education would mean here in North Penn. This is something that's been happening, I think, over several years. We did get the grant, we did receive the approval for the grant and for what our program was designed to do. And as Dr. Hassler said, it is an after-school program. It is designed for those students who have a high degree of absenteeism, who have had several incidents where they have been sent to the principal's office for disciplinary reasons. And the third type of child we would look for in this type of program would be a child who would be transitioning back from another placement, whether that be through a probation placement or through drug and alcohol issues or whatever, that they needed a step before they came back into the high school. This was discussed at both at the Alternative Education Task Force, and at that time it was with the Student Services Special Education Committee. The grant that we applied for, as I said, was for $39,500. We received about 70% of that, so we were looking for about $11,000 and change in order to fund this type of a program. In addition to that, we would need some money to fund transportation, and that would be approximately $9,000. The transportation that we're talking about is to get students home from the program after the program was over. Our plan for transportation is for students to be picked up on the dead-end runs when buses are coming back to the bus barn, bus garage, and again, as I said, we would need a special transportation to get students back at the end of the program. This program is being offered through what is called the experimental program, which is part of the state regulations for education. We are offering 20 hours of instruction in the evening in the major subject areas. It would be on a contractual basis, so we would contract with students as they would clearly know what is expected of them in order to complete the program successfully. We would expect them to attend on a nightly basis. And we would, with your approval, start the process of advertising for teachers and staff in order to start this program. It would be started for a maximum of 50 students, and that is what we think. We may serve less than that. And we would have teachers to teach language arts, English, math, science, and social studies. According to the grant application, it is open to any secondary student, that is children in grades 7 through 12. However, we are anticipating that most of the students are going to be 9 through 12, with few or no 7th or 8th graders. Any other questions?
Any board, any questions relative to that?
Yes. Say maximum of 50 students.
That's correct.
First of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Hassler and you, Mr. Ruffman, because this is something I know that's come up for the 3 years I've been on the board, because that alternative education is getting very, very expensive. And in conjunction with that, are some of the students that we are now sending out to other institutions, for example, Lakeside, will they be part of this program?
They can be. This program is more focusing on the educational component. I think when you talk about some Lakeside, in addition to education, also have a clinical component. We are not looking at getting into that clinical area.
But
some we
that
could
was
be.
just an example.
Sure.
I know
But we had no
I know we're
alternative
sending
before.
students
We had
to
no
various
alternative.
institutions. What I'm saying is, are we going to be pulling some of these kids back in?
And I
could
think
be, yes.
during the 6 to 8 weeks, that's what we want to look at, that if we went ahead and made a recommendation to continue this permanently, where would we have some savings? But,
Okay.
but we had no alternative, so Lakeside was pretty much the place that we
I
sent
appreciate
students.
this approach, because rather than just make the switch, it does give us an opportunity to do a test case, I guess, for lack of a better terminology. And so we would be looking to see if we could extend the program.
Yes.
Now, in terms of teachers, how many teachers would you be talking about hiring?
Well, we would need 4 teachers, and I want to use the term full-time equivalents, because that's important, because you can use one teacher, and they may only work 4 hours that week, but it would result in perhaps 2 teachers would cover that full-time equivalent. So what we would be paying the teachers would be the curriculum rate, and that is covered by what we would receive in the grant and the additional money that we would be asking for the board. But the original grant was to pay for the curriculum.
So this
rate.
would not have anything to do with the current teacher's contract?
Only that it's the curriculum rate that we
Okay.
would be paying the teachers.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Yes.
Lou, you're going to have children in this program from 9th to 12th grade, presumably different levels of academic abilities and achievements. How are we going to make appropriate teaching for up to 50 children
Right.
at different levels with a limited number of teachers?
Okay, in a couple ways, I think. What we will do, initially, we're estimating that we can start the program with about 10 students. So I would think we can live with 1 teacher per subject area for one night, rotate people through in that respect. But there is a wide range of abilities and grade levels that are in this program. What we are looking at doing is making sure that students are receiving the basic competencies that they need in order to pass the class that they would be in. In addition to that, we would be writing a contract for those students so they would clearly understand what would be expected of them. And I think although we're talking about maybe 10 students, we're really talking about almost a tutorial approach so that we would be able to look at students on an individual basis. We may have 3 or 4 ninth graders that we could use as a group to do a small group lesson, while the children who are in 10th and 11th grade could be working individually. I don't see that we would have high numbers of kids in a classroom at one time. And as I see it, as this program grows, then we need to be flexible in how we bring in our staff. And that's why I say I'd rather talk about full-time equivalent teachers than say, yeah, we need 4 teachers, 5 teachers, those types of things.
I think one thing also is that it may not look as the best case scenario for a student, but it is approved by the state, and it is approved by the state under the conditions that they also want to make sure that we're providing the best education possible for the students in school during the day. And this is really an alternative to them, almost in some cases, their last chance. We've worked with them, we've worked them through the discipline process in the school district, and in those cases that they choose not to fit into the discipline, this is their next step. So we're looking at it as a deterrent too in the future for students as far as not wanting to fit the program that we have. So, but it is approved by the state, and that's how we can deliver the education in 20 hours.
Did I read in one of the papers that we got that the students will volunteer for this program?
No. The placement for this program will be through a recommendation of the child study team, which we're presently using, and in conjunction with the principal. So it's not necessarily the idea that it's a voluntary program. We're saying, this is your program. This has not been successful. Just as we've worked with parents to understand that they need, a child may need to be placed at Lakeside or New Life or one of the other programs, we would need to do that same type of approach with these youngsters. I think in the past, one of the ways we handled these kids, is we put them on homebound, when they were receiving 5 hours of instruction a week. We're now offering 20 hours of instruction a week, which is approximately 2/3 of what they would get if they were in full 5-day-a-week school.
So they'll be assigned to this? They can't say, I don't want to do this?
Their assignment.
Okay. Thank you. I'm
Any other
done.
questions? Yes, Ms.
I heard two different answers, Bob. When you first talked about the call-in show and the concerns over us bringing back other students that were already placed out, you said that wasn't the case. Then I later hear, now, are these or are these not exactly those that are qualifying for Lakeside, or are these the ones that are one step above?
Well, let me clarify what I tried to say was that I meant that we're not going to be bringing students back from Lakeside, placing them back into the regular program, and that's what I thought part of what that person on the radio said.
Right.
There is a possibility that we will be bringing some of the students back from Lakeside that we feel could fit this program.
But we'll probably be maintaining the same slots, because then you're bringing those that have developed so far, and they would be
For right
coming
now,
back.
yeah.
They would be actually a step before mainstream.
Yeah.
But we'll still probably be
I
maintaining
would
the
imagine.
40-some slots
Yes. Right now.
that we're
Yes.
planning, so we don't see that as a cost swap.
Right now, no.
Right now, I wouldn't change
The
anything.
program works.
Yeah,
Can
the
you?
program works.
Well, can we actually have the legal authority to mandate a student to move to this 3 to 7 shift, given the fact that they're not court-ordered and they're not,
Remember,
they're
we
not
have a
court-ordered.
responsibility to provide a child with an educational program.
Right.
And this could be the assignment that we're recommending, that this child would benefit from an alternative program. This is an alternative program that we're providing for them.
They will give up a regular
They will not.
7:25 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon,
Not-
or 2:30 in the
Probably
evening.
not easily.
Well, I would say.
For 4 hours? Oh, wait a minute, I see some
But
takers
remember
here.
that this.
3 to 7.
What I neglected to mention, students, and by the grant and by the experimental program of the state, students will stay on track for graduation. So they're not gonna be losing credits or any of that type of thing, so that still continues to operate.
So basically, if you've got the sponsorship of your child's study team, a child can actually trade in a 7.5-hour day for a 4-hour alternative ed program.
But we don't wanna make this to a point where a child, it's not equivalent that the child's gonna come to school for 4 hours and get the same program that he would for.
But he'll get the credits, he can get the credits for
But
graduation.
the other part of this program, which I neglected to say, is that this is a short-term program with the intention to try and get students back into the regular school. So it is not something where a child would stay in this program for 2 years or 3 years. It is written with the idea that we review the child at the end of every semester, and we will work with that child to get back into the regular school. That's the emphasis that we want to do. We don't want to make this I think Bob used the word as making this as a deterrent. We don't want this to be seen as, geez, if I really don't want to go to, I want to work from 7 to 3 and then come to school. That's not what this is about. This really is about for those children who are having difficulties in school, whether it be because of absences or because of multiple infractions of the discipline code.
From my experience in other districts where I worked and we had this, students did not want to be in this program. It may on the surface look like, oh boy, I'm off during the day and I can go for 4 hours at night. They did not want to be there. It really acted as a deterrent.
You had a nighttime program. All the other alternative ed programs of other school districts that I've seen or received information from,
Yeah.
they were all daytime
No,
programs.
I've experienced with an evening program, just basically like this one, and it really did act as a
And we
deterrent.
did research that we can actually mandate this without having to go
One of the other
to the
altern-
level of a court.
I will tell you, one of the other alternatives that I experienced in other schools was was that these students were sometimes expelled. We're talking about students really getting to the end of the line when it comes to discipline or opting not to be in school. So it's the next step to us saying we're going to take a more drastic measure and move for expulsion. But yes, we were able to place students there.
Because,
And we worked with the parents.
well, it's important, if we have this right to mandate, then of course we're obligated for transportation.
And that's
However, if
also-
it was entered into as a voluntary, if the law doesn't uphold us actually requiring them to attend
If
at the
we're-
level that you're assuming, then we would not be, I would think that we don't necessarily have to assume the burden of the transportation.
Well, and that's why I said we need to provide a transportation cost. We need to provide transportation for these students because we can't put those students in the program.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Yes.
Lou, you applied for this grant money to fund the program this year?
Yeah, only for 90 days.
Okay, what happens if we like it?
Well, that's why we wanted to go back and look at it in 6 to 8 weeks and see what it looks like. Does it make sense to operate on an evening program? I, like Bob, have experience working with alternative education programs during the evening. They seem to have been successful. What we need to then look at after a period of time is to determine if we want to continue this program, do we want to modify it, or where we want to go with it. And certainly we could apply for the grant for next year, but the grant only provides so much dollars per child. And if the decision was to run the program, say from October 1st, for argument's sake, it's not the first month of the school year, so that would be approximately 160 days. You would have to look at what that would mean in terms of support, fiscal support from the school board. And I'm not ready to make that recommendation until we take a look at how this operates.
Lou, can you give us your definitions of what will make a successful program?
I think if we see kids who are coming to school and attending, doing their works, doing their work and their assignments, and when we start hearing them say, "I'd really rather be back in the 7 to 3 time slot," I think that's why we would be successful.
Okay.
So I'm really looking at the kids telling us they would work.
By desiring not to be there?
Yes.
Okay.
It's kind of a backwards approach.
I guess that works.
But how would Bill, it goes back to what Bill said, because you're going to have a whole different situation for delivery of the instruction that's going to require compromises.
That's
There's no
correct.
way you can tell me that going in with a program of studies of our regular course of studies is anything akin to what you're doing with serving various levels of students in even in small numbers at the same level. How do they then, in doing that, after 60 days, then mainstream right back in? I don't know how you get,
It was
how
a long
you,
discussion that we
leap.
had internally, especially with the high school people, and with the idea that we would be providing students with a contract, that they would need to complete certain aspects of the program. We agreed administratively, at least, that if they completed that program, they would receive a pass, that they would pass that year. And that would not affect their class rank, it would not affect anybody else's class rank, so it would be really on a pass-fail system.
you mean for that whole school year, even if?
These are only students for one semester.
Right, they spend one semester in the program, correct?
As of right now, that's all we have.
Okay, then they go in back
We-
into the full curriculum, but they've been.
At this point, we don't know what we're gonna do in September, Vicki. So I think
But what
that's a
happens in
question,
January?
we need to take a look at that, because we're only looking at starting this at the beginning of the second semester. So as that closes, and as we decide what we wanna do for September, we need to address that.
Because we'll be at the tail end this year.
That's correct.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering, is how do you ever bring them back to catching up after being on a fully different course of study and different level?
Don't we have that same problem with kids that come back from Lakeside and New Life, the same thing?
They need a bigger
Same
numbers.
types of things.
They
No,
have,
but coming back to us, they
But
have
they-
the same concern.
but they are taking in so many school districts in such large numbers. They have full classrooms. They have classrooms of
Yes, they
different
do.
level, not as complex as us, Bill, I
But they're not
agree,
doing what we're
but
doing
they
in
are
our classroom.
students of 30 that are the same grade level and age level, at least, right? So
Yes.
there's a little bit difference
It's a
then.
little bit different, but I think we can approach that, and we do need, because it is an experimental program under the school code, it does give us flexibility as to how to rate or grade those students and that we would accept what they're doing. And
But
that's
you
why
may-
it's important that we have a contract for the students so they clearly understand what is expected of them in order to maintain themselves on track for graduation.
But if they pass through the first portion of the alternative ed, what I want to know then, once they come into the system, are you saying they also maintain basically a guarantee of a,
Let's say we have an 11th grade student
Right.
who will be placed there to start the second
Yes.
semester
Right.
this year, February 1st, for argument's sake. We would write a contract for that child that he would clearly understand what he needs to complete in order to receive a passing grade or a pass for the 11th grade.
for the whole year,
He would then-
regardless of what they do when they come back in?
That's right. He would have to pass certain competencies in order to demonstrate, and that would be written as part of the contract, in order to demonstrate that he would receive a passing grade. He would then come in with the assumption that things went well, he would move into 12th grade, and he would then take the 12th grade curriculum.
But it's not an automatic.
It's not an automatic. This is all very individual.
I think it's similar, in some cases, somewhat similar to summer school. When a student fails a course in the summer, yes, they make it up. It's not the exact same course, but it falls on them to be able to make up enough so that they can fit into the next level as they move up. And again, this is an alternative. This is an alternative to being in the regular ed class during the day and doing what you're supposed to be doing while you're in the regular ed part of
But
it.
if I understand, a student that's failing, maybe, and he's destined, basically, he's got these grades that are down so far, he'd need to carry A's in order to bring him up to the average that he needs. Under this program, if he enters and he starts out, and as long as he passes under this program, he's essentially made a pass for that year.
He's passed the year, yes.
All right, I think
Okay.
we've belabored this
Really?
enough. Does anybody else have any other questions relative to the subject? Hearing none, does the audience have any questions? Seeing none, I just, these two items, for educational services, the alternate education program and the technology purchases, there'll be action items on the agenda a week Thursday. One other item I want to cover, then we'll get into the redistricting. This other item will be quick. It's related to BASE. The committee, curriculum committee, which I chair, not curriculum, excuse me, policy committee that I do everything. The policy committee that I chair had their first meeting of the year tonight, and we did not have a lot of information related to this program that we wanted to bring up as the contract is nearing the renewal period. And so the policy committee has tabled this item for now until we can review the contract that is being revised by our solicitor and then decide how we're going to proceed from there. One thing that I would like to do, because of the timing of the contract, and to notify the base people that we are still going to review this and possibly make changes or modifications, and which could possibly invite other people to bid and other things along this line. We have to notify the base contract provider notice before the end of this month, pursuant to the agreement that additional proposals will be invited for review and possible award. Now, Mr. Solicitor, this is not an action meeting, but can we direct you to do that in any case?
What I would suggest, and I think you've outlined it very well, one of the problems we have is that the base contract is worded in such a fashion as to be complicated and difficult in certain sections. One of those sections is the section that deals with amendments to the contract as it is related to the section for termination. And so essentially what we have to do is give notice before February 1st that we will invite additional bids for the base contract, that will allow us to make modifications to the contract and offer them to the same provider. And that's just because of the phraseology of the contract that was written some years ago, and it creates some difficulty. Yeah, the section, as Bill Allen is giving me here, is 4D5, I believe, in the contract. And what it says, this agreement shall be automatically renewed for succeeding one-year terms unless the school board has made a determination by February 1 of each year. Notice the same shall be given to the provider by February 1, that additional proposals will be invited for review and possible award. So that's the only way that we can make amendments to the contract. There is a provision here for amendments, if I can find it, but all it says is that amendments will be by mutual agreement of the parties with their signatures attached thereto. So we need to utilize this procedure in order to make the amendments that are necessary.
My question then is, can we, sitting here tonight, direct you to do that?
Yes, you can direct me to engage in negotiations with the provider, and then obviously if we're not finished by the time of the 22nd, then you'll have to pass that motion.
Well, if we have an action meeting next week,
That's
why
right.
couldn't we put it on the agenda for next week?
Well, he said that.
That would still
That's
be
what
before
he
the
just
end of
said.
January.
That's right.
That's what I said.
That's
I
okay.
thought it was 22nd. What is 21st or 22nd? 21st, excuse me, 21st, not 22nd.
All right. That's all I wanted to bring up about base. I'm not going to invite any questions from the audience because it's too new and and there's too much work to be done in that area. One other item for the board members, there will be a short executive session immediately following this meeting in the room across the way. Okay, we're getting on to what I think most of you heard for tonight. I'm sorry I held you up, but I want to get those other items behind us so it leave the table clear for the redistricting. As we're proceeding in this, we're most thankful that many of the committee are here this evening, and the amount of work and effort that's been put into this is tremendously appreciated. And I've been very thankful I have been on that committee or associated with it. Because I know the effort, it's a no-win, it's like being on the school board, it's a no-win proposition. So I guess the way to start this off is I would like, and give me some direction, somebody to tell me where the committee is and the recommendation is as we sit here this evening.
I have
Oh, Mr. O'Donnell, member of the committee.
I have just a brief statement, a summary of where we are. Since the presentation on December 7th by the Elementary Redistricting Committee, 2 public input meetings were conducted. Following those meetings, the committee met twice to review the questions and concerns raised by the community members. In your packet this evening, you will find responses to questions and additional data and modifications to the plan suggested by the committee. This time, I'd like to turn it over to Don Venema to review the additional information that was gathered and the modifications to the initial proposal. Before I give it to you, when you're done with your proposal, I'm going to have a recommendation myself. So it's not all said and done after he reads his recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. O'Donnell. What we have tonight in the packet that you've received and
If you can't hear, let us know. Can you all hear him? Can't hear him.
No.
Bring that mic a little closer to you and see if that helps.
Maybe it's turn it up a little. Where's John?
No button. I'll try to speak up. I can usually do that.
I don't think it's on, though.
Can you hear me, folks?
It's not on.
How's that? Okay, what I want to do this evening is review some of the questions that the committee analyzed following the public sessions that were held in December, and also some of the questions that were raised at the original presentation on December the 7th. There are more than the 11 items here that were raised by various people in 2 public sessions, but what we did was tend to condense those at the committee meeting and prioritize and try to address some of the most, what we consider to be the most important questions and give you answers to those. I'll go through the list, make brief comments about each one, and then talk about modifications that the committee feels ought to be made. First of all, in your packet, on the second page labeled number 2, or excuse me, page 3, is a projection of enrollments that would occur over the next 5 years if there were no boundary changes made. That's one piece we never included in the original presentation, but to show you the impact of not doing anything, we felt it was important to see this just in a similar format to the way we've made proposal presentations. I think the most obvious thing, if you look on page 3, is to see that NAP, of course, would continue to be seriously underutilized, and since we put the addition onto NAP, that doesn't make much sense. You also see dramatic increases in Bridle Path, taking it to more than 50 students beyond its capacity, approximately 50 students beyond capacity, and at Gwinnor, dramatically beyond capacity. Of course, we already have 2 temporary modulars there that are being removed. So clearly, the reason for the need to do something. One of the questions that was raised at the public input sessions was a concern about students that would have to be moved more than once if the plan was approved. I think it's important to make a distinction between neighborhoods that have been affected for a second time and individual students who have actually been impacted by this move. We printed out lists of all the students who were affected here, went back in our files, and could find no individuals who were actually in first or second grade several years ago, in 1994-95, who were moved and then who would be affected again by this move while elementary students. We were able to identify none that were affected, and that seemed to be a serious question that was raised at our initial presentation. There was a question raised about why we chose to expand Knapp Elementary versus Gwinnor. Obviously, this is after the fact, but it's important to realize there were good reasons that the board used in making those decisions. And the primary reasons we've listed there as the number of acres that were available and the dramatic need for improvements in the multipurpose room and the IMC at Knapp. Incidentally, the progression of that project is right on target, in fact, a little bit ahead of time. So we feel very comfortable about an opening in September without much problem. The next item, the impact of the proposal on transportation. In conversations with Mr. Cotran, our coordinator of transportation, he indicated that this really causes very little impact on bus routes and, of course, does not create any other significant transportation changes that brought about by the proposal. All of the students affected by the plan currently ride the bus and would continue to ride the bus, with one exception, and that the exception relates to one of the modifications that we'll talk about at the end of the review of these questions. There's a small segment that might be impacted if the board chooses to deal with this modification. The next item has to do with the number of students in the neighborhood to be moved from Knapp from Bridle Path. Several parents did surveys and went door to door, I believe. We appreciate their efforts with this and came up with numbers of students that were impacted by this move different from the numbers that we have in our transportation files. I took a look at the list of students along with the committee, and it was clear that there were a couple students that were missed, particularly students who live on Line Street that weren't included in the neighborhood that was studied. And as well, the families indicated to us, or the parents indicated to us, that there were some students or families who planned to send their students to private schools, other families who planned to move out of the area. It's pretty obvious that we don't have that kind of information when we do a study like this. And of course, we have no guarantees that any families would move between now and September. And of course, we also don't know how many ownerships might change and families might move into the district and additional students might emerge in different grades. So those are the kinds of things that we face and deal with all the time. We have a lot of mobility in the district, and even though our trend overall is upward, we're seeing a decline in elementary enrollment, but we also have a lot of mobility. We have a lot of people moving into the district and moving out of the district. So we don't feel, and the committee discussed this at length in our follow-up sessions, that these numbers are necessarily significant enough to make a difference in the proposal. The question raised by a board member at the original presentation is, what is the shelf life of this plan? How long will this last us so that we don't have to face making boundary changes again? Well, that's always difficult to ask, and the initiative and the effort by the committee was to try to put together a plan that would give some cushion and enable us not have to do this for another 4 or 5 years. The feeling of the committee in our analysis, and based on what we know at this time, if we don't have any unexpected pockets of growth, is we're hoping that this would carry us through another 5 years, at least as it relates to this particular group of schools that are impacted. Next item, the impact created if we would retain all of the Bridle Path students and move only the students who would move into the new Cambridge Knoll development of 83 homes. That was suggested by several people. I had conversations with board members about this, and we prepared an enrollment projection for this scenario using all of the criteria that we've used in our previous studies, and that scenario exists on page 4 in your packet. And again, using the straight line method for making projections, our formulas for housing impact, we're showing the Bridle Path enrollment to be right at or slightly above capacity over the next 5 years. That would reflect the removal of the housing impact students. We're projecting about 26 students to emerge from that housing unit for the elementary schools. And in the total projections, you can see the numbers that are there. That doesn't create the same amount of cushion that we had hoped for that existed in the original proposal. Okay, next item. What impact is created if the neighborhood boundary for students moving from Gwynnor to Gwinnett Square were changed to the railroad tracks? One of the parents who raised a concern during the public input session referred to a segment, actually it's a triangle segment that's evident on the back of this page in the black circled area, that live in that triangle area, either on Church Road, this side of the railroad tracks, or on Hancock Street, this side of the railroad tracks. In fact, it happens to be the houses right out here across from the ESC. There's a total of 5 students who live there. When you look at the original map with the dark blue section, you can see that those students who live there are not part of the neighborhood that would be moving from this region. There's about 47 students total in this dark blue area. All but 5 of them live in the Pembroke apartment area or the neighborhood directly across the street from that. So they are clearly removed from the rest of the population. When the committee looked at this, knowing that there were 5 students that live in this segment, the feeling was that we could make a modification and should make a modification in where we draw the line there. So in other words, instead of the line coming down all the way from Church Road to Hancock, it would come down to the railroad tracks and then follow the railroad tracks up. Again, that means 5 more students attending Gwynnor, or would continue to attend Gwynnor. Now these happen to be walkers, so my comment about transportation referred to everyone riding the bus. Well, this would be the exception to that. Another suggestion that was made by 1 or 2 of the families that are affected by this is, could we do something special for the 5th graders? Could we permit the 5th grade students that are scheduled to change schools in the plan or in the proposal to remain in their current school for 1 more year? In other words, to get through their 6th grade year before they move on to middle school. The committee felt that this option would work, but only if parents provide transportation according to guidelines in the modification listed below. And I'll talk about that, the reasoning for that a little bit when I get to the modifications. Next item has to do with the middle school boundaries. We've talked quite a bit about middle schools, and there's some debate about whether we ought to make any changes in middle school boundaries now. The feeling of the committee is that since it would impact more students and families, that at this time we ought to stick to the elementary realignment component and leave the middle school boundaries as they currently are. At the last meeting, I gave you projections under 3 different scenarios regarding the middle schools. The concern that we have is the growth that's occurring in the Pembroke area. So if we don't address it, at this point it appears as though sometime soon we're going to have to face some crowded conditions at Pembroke if things go as projected. Finally, a question that I'll pass on to Art Wood regarding open space holdings in the municipalities in the district. Art's statistics are on page 5, and Art, do you have any comments to make regarding those?
Yes, Don, thank you. The only thing I'd like to point out is this space in acres is the open space that's currently owned by the municipality and does not reflect land preservation or land trusts, such as the Roth Farm and the farm next to the Roth Farm as you come back toward Gwynnor Elementary. So there is additional space throughout the district that's either in land trust or land preservation where there will be no building and there will be no usage, but it's not reflected in the open space plan.
Okay, if you'll just give me a few more minutes, I'll talk about the modifications and then entertain any questions from the board. The committee is suggesting 3 modifications to the plan. One is to accommodate the parents of current 5th grade students, and our counts indicate that there are a total of 18 5th graders, either in the current Gwynnor segments or the Bridle Path segments that would be moving according to the proposal. What we're suggesting is that in order to do this, that we not get into what we call grandfathering, which means that buses would need to drive into buses picking up students and delivering students from 2 different sending areas would be traveling, crossing one another, moving from one sending area to another. It gets very complicated to do that. And if we enact our transfer process, we would permit parents who request a transfer, give them the option of retaining the 5th grader in their current school for just 1 more year prior to their moving on to 6th grade. I feel the committee thought about this, and of course are concerned about the kids that have to move for 1 year and then would again have to adjust and move into a middle school. We feel that this could be accommodated. Again, we have no idea how many parents would opt to do this, but it would give them the option, provided they submit a written request, and there'll be a date determined to do that, to permit that to happen. Second thing that we're proposing was what I discussed earlier regarding the triangle and the movement of the boundary to the railroad tracks to accommodate those 5 students that are somewhat isolated in the segment that would move from Gwynnor to Gwinnett Square. And the third recommendation at this time is to make no changes to the middle school boundaries for the coming year, even though we know that there is some growth that's projected, particularly at Pembroke Middle School. Okay, at this time
Let me ask you a question before you start. This is as you just outlined, is the recommendation of the majority of the committee.
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell, he just presented the committee's conclusion. You were going to comment to that.
I just have a comment. This is a tough decision the board has to make. If those modules weren't going down, if they didn't have to be torn down, we wouldn't have to do this. Unfortunately, we have to do it. And if we don't, we're going to be 170 kids over, and whatever that, 109 over, 12 over, 170 under. We have to do something. I've heard the parents, and I feel for them. I mean, I have a daughter too, and I know what it's like. Excuse me. I don't know what it's like. I wouldn't want to know. The best recommendation that I can come forth with tonight, and I heard everybody, and I feel for I've had phone calls at home. We have a letter here tonight. we have to do something, but I'm gonna give you a fourth option, is I'm gonna recommend that we leave the bridle path area alone, the current homes now, but before over, our enrollment's declining, in my opinion, from the numbers we've seen. Your numbers are 11, nobody has a crystal ball. There's at least 38 families that will not be disrupted. So I'm gonna recommend to the board that we add a fourth item here to leave the bridle path area alone for the current homes. The new homes to be moved, they're not built yet, to be moved over to Gwynedd Square.
All right, Mr. O'Donnell has made a recommendation or modification to the plan that was submitted by the committee. I'd like to get some other board input relative to the committee's plan and to Frank's modification.
Just
Yes.
a comment. Even if there is 4 kids over, or 5 kids over, 6 kids over, I am willing to, in my opinion, recommend to pay the extra price for the age or whatever we need for the classrooms that are over our guidelines.
Okay. I'd like to go around the board, not that I want to pick on anybody, but Pat, I'd like to pick on you anyway. I'd like to get a feeling from the board relative to the committee's report and to the modification, and maybe you got another one, but right now, we have 2 on the table. How do you feel?
I would first of all like to thank the members of the committee because, as I said before, I was involved in the middle school redistricting, and this is not a pleasant thing a board has to do. You are affecting families and children. Having said that, I know that an awful lot of time was put into this. It isn't something that you approach lightly or approach without an awful lot of thought and consideration. Frank, I can appreciate you making an additional request. The only concern I have is that if the numbers do change, they don't stay with the projections, and they go even higher, you're going to have people, we're going to be back here next year addressing bridle path and going through the same thing again. So my recommendation would be to stay with the recommendations of the committee.
Well, see, right now, we have declining enrollment, and it may be down. There's so much in here that we only talk
I know.
about 4 students.
Frank,
I know you're dealing with.
I think you made your point. Let's just get everybody's opinion.
I know you're dealing with
Terry,
variables.
what's your position?
I favor what Mr. O'Donnell's saying, but I would like to know if we can follow the logic through and how the numbers would pan out if we did that. Add that to what you were recommending. How does it?
That's shown on page 4. Yes. What he's suggesting, if you look on page 4, sending to NAP only the future students from the housing units means essentially that we would not move any students from Bridle Path into NAP. In other words, the only students who would move to NAP from the Bridle Path area are the kids who eventually come from those new homes in that tract. What we showed here is the impact of that change, and you can see how that relates to capacity.
Okay, the existing homes.
The existing homes would.
That are there, and then where in the land scheme, where do those, where are the existing homes compared to where are the starts that haven't started yet?
The starts are the ones right next to Lansdale Catholic.
Right.
That section is an 83-unit development.
If that section going, but the existing homes not going, are the existing homes in the middle of that, or are they on
The existing homes are to the east
They're
of
on
that.
the end, so
Yes, it would not be, you could draw a
it'd be
line.
similar to what happened in Hatfield and Walk Farm.
Well, I don't
They
remember
got-
what that
they
was,
got
but
houses on this side that are going all the way over there to Walk
No,
Farm.
you wouldn't
Houses
face that.
over there.
You wouldn't
And that
face that.
kind of- Because they weren't built yet.
right, if you see, you know where the Lansdale Avenue zigs by Lansdale Catholic, that open field area, now very open field area, is what's being developed. The houses to the east of that would
All right. If
remain
you
a bridle
take-
path
you take
instead of
what-
moving to NAP.
What Frank said about the existing homes
Right,
that he's talking about.
right.
And leave them at Bridle Path and draw your line where the new ones are and send the new ones where they need to go, how would those numbers play out?
That's what
That's what
this
this
is.
is.
That's right.
Okay. Well, then how would those numbers go up? Is that
Well,
what he said?
they're not up.
Because you used your straight line. Did you ever call Penn State like that?
Yes, I did.
Oh, okay.
I called them, and they provide information based on 1990 census. It's a federal agency out of the state, so they don't do enrollment projections.
So where do you stand on this, Terry? You stand, I mean, it's not, I'm not gonna hold you forever here, but right now, huh?
All four.
You're for-
I'd be in favor of all four. They're three and adding his in.
Oh, you so the change, Frank?
Yes.
Okay.
Consensus gathering.
Vince?
Yeah, I had the same questions about the straight line use and not any possible change. It already does enrollments like waves, and it comes up and it comes down, or it's down right now, so. I like Frank's additional add to it. I know there's a challenge to some of the numbers. We do know that enrollment is dropping, at least in these 35 homes or 40 homes that did the survey, for sure. So we can see a shift, which will help us accommodate the 4 people that you're talking about. I'm in favor of all 4 recommendations, including the one Frank put on.
Okay. Mr. Schilling? I'll get to him.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
I always make Mr. Allen last.
Hey, I got an idea. On the average, why can't, for the particular people, what is it? 38? 38. Why can't we say, okay, we'll keep you there, but in 2 years, if we have a problem, we will move you then? Can we do that?
In 2 years, the enrollment go down.
Well,
In 4 years, we go down.
Well, according to this, it's going up and up and up. So my point is, if you leave them there and you have a problem, you know what I'm saying, like, take his suggestion and leave them at Bridle Path. And if you have a problem in 2 or 3 years, then you'll have to move them. Can you do that?
Sure. Well,
There's a lot of valid points. But here's where I'm coming from, right here. When I listen to the parents,
Yeah, but you're giving them,
you're right.
you're doing.
I'd say, let's pay the extra money for the teachers, the aides, whatever we need, for the 4, 5, 6 students that we're talking about. You're right, but I'd rather do it,
Well, you could deal with that at that time. My point is I don't want to smack the committee in the face and say, hey, look,
I'm not trying to do that either.
Let me solve this controversy. John, what I hear you saying is that you go along with what Frank is saying, but you want to make the parents aware that if something happens in 2 years from now, and we have to make that change, we may have to make that change.
Right, in other words, we will move those.
The board will
kids.
have to do what it has to do if something
Right,
happens.
right now, if you look at this, it's fine.
If it goes down, then you don't have to do anything. Okay, I hear where you're at.
You're only talking for students.
One other point I want to make before I get to Vicki, just one other point, not that I'm voting one way or the other, is that if we go along with the plan as Frank O'Donnell brings out, and it was pointed out, he says, fine, we got to have additional aides or additional teachers or whatever, just so the parents understand the classroom sizes may be larger, or they will be larger, than the guidelines. So if we go that way, I hope we don't hear in the middle of next year that my class size is too big. But we will, okay. Vicki?
Exactly my point. Fairness is in the eyes of the beholder, and perhaps for those parents that are in this area that don't get moved, they may be willing to accept that. But all the other children that are in that school now attending the classes of 27, 28, or 29 because you felt that we didn't need to
Vicki,
move them.
if you
to other
follow the
classes.
straight line numbers out in their projections, our enrollment in most of those classes is gonna be 30. Do you really believe that's gonna happen?
Well,
If you follow the straight line projections today, the 10-day enrollments, I move them out, we're gonna have 3,900 kids at the high school. Do you believe that's gonna happen?
No,
No, of course not.
Vince, you're arguing with me. I'm trying to make a very basic point of the fact that when you do this, as Don said, you're affecting other
At
students.
the moment, it's 4 students.
And-
9 or 30 in every class, 4. 29, 729, 725 is 4.
Well, we don't know how they fall in all the grade levels.
But I believe it's going down.
But what I'd like to know is there's a housing start impact estimation here.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, that was based on a development, X number of houses and a certain ratio that you applied.
That's right.
What was the ratio that you applied? How generous was that?
Well, the ratio for housing units for elementary students was 0.31. In other words, we anticipate if you have a 100-unit development that we get 31 elementary students from that. That was based on an analysis of other housing developments that currently exist, different types, townhouses, single units, very expensive, moderately expensive. So we came up with a ratio based on looking at how many students actually came from existing developments to come up with a formula or a ratio that would enable us to project how many would come from there.
So
Now, who knows?
it's
Out of
a projection.
83, we might get 50 or 60, we might get 15 or 20. I mean, we don't know for sure, but we had to come up with a system, with a ratio in a logical way to calculate that.
Now, there's 38 students involved in what Frank was talking about.
They're there now.
38
They're there now.
existing
There's
students.
no calculation.
I know that, Frank, I know that.
Right.
What I wanted to know is, did this get presented to the committee? You're on the committee, so you had access to the committee all the way through. Was this presented, and
Yes.
so what were the arguments or reasons why it wasn't?
The committee came back with a recommendation.
I can respond to the conversation we had about it. We did talk about that at length, and that was one of the options that was listed here, or the questions that was answered. The bottom line was the number of students that we project. And, you know, if you change the formulas that we use for doing our calculating, obviously you're going to impact the numbers differently. The committee felt that since the numbers were at capacity and that our job was to create some cushions so that we could accommodate some growth, that it wasn't reasonable to make that modification and change because, according to the way we calculated these things, the numbers remained at capacity. So that's the basis of the discussion, and that's the basis of the conclusion that the committee made.
Well, essentially, this other part that's moving from Glenmore to Gwinnett Square,
Yeah.
how many students? That's another one. I guess that if you take it down, that it's only 5 students per grade level.
Well, there's 47 students in that section. This is the section that's in Gwynn Nor that would move to Gwinnett Square to reduce the Gwynn Nor population. It doesn't impact.
So I guess it could apply just about to almost any of these areas. And we could just do the easiest thing, which is to say, we're just gonna overflow here. And I guess that's why I wondered how it rolled around, because you're taking a section out of Gwynn Nor, but if you leave it there, you're only talking 5 students per grade level too. And if we keep this other section that's on the other side, except for the Cambridge, or what is it?
Cambridge Mall, I believe it's called.
development, and we keep everybody that's there where they currently are, well, we're talking maybe another 30 or so without the housing starts.
Approximately.
And we could have these little islands inside with just new developments being shifted.
No, he wants to shift Cambridge Knoll out, back to Knapp. So that's a split. They're not talking about leaving that there.
I know. Well, I know, you're saying about shifting it to Knapp.
The new construction
But-
goes to Knapp under the new plan, right?
Right.
That's the proposal that the committee came up with.
Right, but if we stuck to just the new housing starts and looked at it by only 5 or 6 more students per grade level, it could be said about each one of these changes. And I think.
Absolutely.
It's not the politically correct thing to do at this moment, but it's true of all of it. And I think as you look forward at these middle school boundaries, I'm probably gonna lose this for everyone here. I think you need to take a good hard look at what we're doing by avoiding the one situation of these small numbers moving. I had a child who, unfortunately, we weren't as lucky as you, Frank. We've shifted several occasions, shifted from Nash to Gwinnett Square. When Gwinnett Square was moved, the district didn't change our sending middle school. Didn't want to address it. We didn't want it addressed then, too, to tell you the truth. We advocated to leave us at Penfield. What was the future of our children? Graduating class after graduating class, 5, 6 students out of the entire Gwinnett Square population were new students to the Penfield, while all the rest, 98% of their classmates, went off to Pembroke.
Becky, I want to,
This is a serious issue that I think you need to think about as we, well, not with the elementary committee, but I believe with each of these parents, we owe it to them as an administrative effort to discuss with them what choices need to be made about what's really in the social and emotional best interest of their children. They hit sixth grade, and then they have their crying child at home, while all the parents, all the kids, all the teachers are talking about their kids going to Penndale. Their children, their lonely few, 5 kids maybe out of the entire sixth grade, are going to be there. Penndale, I've got to go to Penndale. What seems great for them now, or what is hard to bite the bullet on right now, we are actually perpetuating what is a very sinful thing, which is to leave kids out to conquer the middle schools all alone. And I think we need to really take it one step beyond, not with these elementary boundaries, but at least talk to these parents. Don't wait for them to suddenly realize what they overlooked when their children are going to hit sixth grade if they want to fight to keep them where their current friends are. Well, they're going to find 2 years from now, their sixth grader isn't buying that rationale that they're going to meet up with their old friends from 2 or 3 years ago. You're going to see that they've had to leave 100% of the friends they have today.
all right, Becky, I think you made your point. Bill Allen, thank you for
Did you say me?
yes,
I'm sorry.
pay attention.
First, a little history. This is the third time that I've been on the school board where we've had a redistricting.
We'll knock it off.
Yeah, I know. Apparently it's my fault. No, they never get easy. In fact, the last time we did the elementary schools, I was on the committee. And at that time, I was part of the committee that moved my own children to another school, much to their chagrin. But I knew it made sense, and in about one day, they got over it. My wife didn't, but the kids were fine.
That's ridiculous.
These things are never easy. When for every one that we've had, we've heard, can we grandfather? Can we make exceptions? Can we do something that the committee didn't recommend? So what I'm going to say is I'm going to do what the committee recommends. I appreciate the work they put into this. They've had a lot of discussion. They've done a lot of homework that we haven't done, that we haven't seen. And for us to make a decision that is contrary to what they think is best, I don't think is fair to them. Secondly, and I've said this before, it's nice to make exceptions for people, but they do affect all the other students and parents that aren't here. And it's nice to say, we'll take the class size up to satisfy some people that don't want to move, but I think the people that are going to stay at the school and be affected should have a say in that issue also, because their children are affected. They are affected. They're not here to say, I don't think it's right that our classes go oversized for the reason being that we want to satisfy some people that don't want to move. I think that's very unfair to them. And I think it's somewhat irresponsible for us to say we'll spend the money to do so without asking the other people if we should spend their money to do so. The committee has made a recommendation, and I'm going to vote, and I support what they're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Now, this is a work session. We're not taking a vote here tonight, but I wanted to go around and get the input from the board members, how they feel relative to what was recommended by the committee and the amendment that was made, or if they had another plan or another change, another modification. This is going to be put on the action agenda a week Thursday, and we'll make a decision at that time which way we're going to go. As we sit here this evening, the motion will go on the agenda as the committee presents. Frank, then there can be an amendment to that motion, and the votes will go where they go as related to now. There's nothing to say that between now and Thursday, the waters will part, there'll be another plan, but let's be honest, I think with all the work that's been in, all the meetings that's been held, and all the discussions been done, I think what you're looking at happening a week Thursday, and I don't want to put false hopes or ideas in people's minds, but I think what's going to happen next Thursday, this board is going to vote for Plan A or Plan B, and that's the way it's going to come down. With those words, I'd love to have anybody who wants to add any more input to the board. You're welcome to go to the podium.
By the way, Happy New Year to everyone. George Griffin, 105 Trotter Lane. Yes, I'm here again. A quick question, just for point of clarification. The capacity at Gwynnor Elementary, that is 625 students now, forever, as forever stands.
Yes, that's with, considering the removal of the 2 temporary modulars that are there.
And retaining the 6 permanent.
Retaining the 6 permanent modulars.
Okay.
Physical or functional capacity? It's functional.
Functional
capacity, and it's a 10% scheduling change?
Well, that's based upon 25 students per regular classroom.
And if I did some real quick mathematics, by the way, all the 5th graders at Gwynnor appreciate the ability to stay there, but I guess the thing that I'm confused, I'm looking at your document you distributed December 2nd in regards to what the capacity at Gwynnor would have been. We'll just look at the first year, because I think it indicates that we might even have more flexibility. First, of all the schools, as I've stated before, that had the most housing impact is Gwynnor. I asked a question before of why there wasn't any expansion at Gwynnor. We had some wonderful explanations, some more explanations today. I'll just remind everybody about the 7 P's rule. Proper prior planning prevents poor performance. But anyway, we'll leave that one alone because I did some mathematics. If you compare your chart with the chart you came today, and if my math is incorrect, please run down behind me and tell me I'm wrong, because I'd love to hear it. That the difference between Gwynnor 6th graders with your current proposal and Gwynnor with the original proposal is about 13 students different. 5th grade was 14, 4th grade was 27, that was where the big hitter was, 3rd grade was 4. The suggestion that you made in regards to just allowing the 5th graders with the transportation exception suggested, I think, if my math is right, with the capacity of 625, that I think you could be able to give grant, at least at Gwynnor, back to 4th grade. And that's 4th grade next year, not what we're talking this year. So maybe we could be able to check through the numbers, and I'd also like to be able to suggest that the whole issue in regard to these temporary structures with the amount of issues, the problems with the municipality where Gwynnor's in, there has to be some other additional communications with them, because unfortunately that school has to be able to deal with Montgomery Township, the largest township in regards to the growth that's going on. And I won't say it's this board, but it's some other boards in the past decided not to build another elementary school, which we wouldn't be in this problem today. I'll go back to my 7 Ps before. This problem is going to continue to bite us where we don't want us to bite us. We have to do something very creatively and imaginative, not playing a game of checkers and chess with our kids that we all care a lot about. And I think that we should go back at least to the 4th grade next year, the kids that are going into 4th grade next year, and potentially leaving those students there, and also potentially those temporary temporary classroom facilities, to see if we can negotiate with the municipality to allow that they stay there for a very short, limited period of time. Again, as I say, I appreciate the additional thought that went into this, but I think there may be some more room even with the idea of spending a little extra money for aides, et cetera. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no one else, we have someone else?
H. Bruce Gordon, Montgomery Township. Personally, my family's not affected, and for that, of course, any parent would be thankful. The idea of expanding or allowing classrooms to go beyond the current district recommended size of 25 and applying aides to those classrooms, to me, seems reprehensible. We've been through this before. Aides are not the answer. The kids need the attention that a teacher provides, and the smaller the classroom, the better. Let's not modify this plan where we're going to need aides because classroom is going to be bigger than we expect. Thank you.
You all know me. Claudia Herman, 110 Gwynmont Circle, Montgomery Township. I would first like to say thank you, Mrs. Scher. Thank you for your empathy. Thank you for your understanding. Thank you for putting yourself where we are today. I applaud you for the courage to speak up. I have probably said it all a million times since I've come to these meetings. The last meeting I came to, I went home and cried. I cried for the anguish and the pain that my kids are going to live through, but not only my kids, our whole family, because we are being forced to leave our community. It has become our community, and now we will leave our community. I contacted the Department of Education to see if I had any recourse, and I was told by Dr. Stanwood at Student Services that no, we don't. We have no recourse, we have no rights, we basically have to influence you, the board. Again, I came away feeling frustrated and helpless. We are being forced to suffer the consequences of your previous decisions and actions or lack of actions, i.e., 1994, a new elementary school in Montgomery Township in an area that desperately needed it, the sale of Keenest Road to David Cutler, who has now put more houses in an area inundated with children. The board and the administration knew what we were being faced with, but chose to look the other way. I call it the emperor with no clothes syndrome. And now turns around totally unaccountable and puts the burden on the parents and the children to temporarily fix a mess that we did not create. The best example I could come up with is our kitchen ceiling. We saw a wet spot, so what did we do? We ran upstairs and we patched and we caulked the fixtures and the tub. And we said, okay, that took care of it, redistricting 1. Then we saw another wet spot, and we went back up and we put towels down, and we patched and we caulked, redistricting 2. And then we saw it leaking, so we put a bucket down, redistricting 3. Our children are the patch and the caulk and the buckets in these redistrictings. We should be fixing our pipes, replacing our pipes, not using our children as the patchwork for the problems that we have. I've said it several times and I'm going to say it again. I would implore this board to step up to the plate and do the right thing. Stop using our children to fix the messes in North Penn. Put our children first, ladies and gentlemen. You know, without the children, you're just a governing board of real estate. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Dorothy Hoban. I live at 108 Clayton Court in Montgomery Township. We moved to the North Penn School District 2 years ago. And I know that some of you are talking about children not being redistricted before. But just having moved 2 years ago, I understand the pain of what I'm going to go through in September because I've just done it. And that's all that I hear at home right now is, oh, Mom, I can't go through this again. What is going to happen in September is my children are going to enter a school that they're not familiar with. They're not going to have the majority of their friends with them, and they're not going to know one single teacher or even the principal. There's a safety factor here to consider. There's a social factor. They're just finally getting comfortable with Gwynnor. My son just said to me today, he said, I just finally learned the names of all of the teachers within Gwynnor, and now I won't know them. And he only has 2 more years. My oldest son will be going into 5th grade next year. So he's not eligible for your exception or your amendment, which I appreciate, but I probably wouldn't take advantage of it anyway because I have a younger son who'll be entering 3rd grade, and he would not want to be going to a different school than his older brother if he didn't have the opportunity to do that as well. When we moved to the school district 2 years ago, it was in the summer. We were told at that time, when I went to register the kids right here in this building, we were not told that we were already over capacity in Gwynnor, which I believe that they were. If they weren't over, they were very near capacity at that time. If they put us at Knapp 2 years ago, this would be a non-issue for us because my children would have had the opportunity to make their friends and still have the opportunity for a few more years to continue to feel comfortable. But we weren't told about that. So it leads me to believe that maybe, and I sense from some of your comments tonight that some of you are also not comfortable with some of the numbers. Some of you are not comfortable with the projections because tomorrow something new can happen and those projections would be out of the water. I would like to know whether you're looking for a bandage for this particular situation because that's what it sounds like. I appreciate the fact that you want to make exceptions for 5 students and for 38 students, and I'd like to be a part of those exceptions myself. But the fact of the matter is, if they're so overcrowded, how is that going to help? You're just chiseling away at the fix that you've created. So is this board looking for a long-term solution to the problems that seem to exist, or are you just looking to not have as many parents out here like I have to out of concern for the emotional issues that we're going to go through? And I'd like to think that you're in this for a long term, not just a bandage, not because, oh, there'll only be 30 parents tonight who'll complain, or there'll only be 20 parents to complain. I'd like to think that you are thinking of this in the long term, and I thank you, Mrs. Scher, for at least addressing that situation, the emotional situation, and also the fact that there are no recommendations for middle school redistricting, and we don't want to be faced with that in the future either. So I would urge you to please take all of this into consideration when you're making your decisions and try to find a way to impact the least amount of children, but also look at the long run because the 5-year shelf life looks a little bit extravagant. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's next?
Yes, my name is Ann Kravitz, 4401 Congress Court, Montgomery Township. I've been to every meeting so far regarding this predicament we're in. My son, who's 10 years old, who's a 4th grader at Gwynnor, has also been to every meeting. And he has sat through every meeting with my husband and I because he wants to. He begs us to come. He doesn't want to stay home. He's involved. It's his school who we're talking about. It's his life. I need to make a correction. I made the last meeting of the redistricting. My son was involved in the last redistricting. Some people are under the impression he was not. When I bought my house in 1991, he would have been going to Knapp Elementary School for kindergarten. I brought him to Knapp to be evaluated, which they did back then. They evaluated the kindergartners. Ann Heffron, who was replacing Lita Thompson at the time, Lita was on a sabbatical. Ann Heffron, who happens to be my neighbor also, evaluated him at Knapp Elementary School. When I was at Knapp, he was in her office being evaluated. I was in the outer part of the school. A mother said to me, there's going to be a redistricting. Your child will not be here very long. I looked into that, and I found out that it was true, that within a year or two, he would most likely be going to Gwynnor. At that time, I chose to not traumatize his life, to keep him in a private school, which I did for 2 years. I put him in pre-kindergarten and kindergarten just to stall for time. I stalled for those 2 years, and my prayers were answered, and Gwynnor was the school he'd be going to, which I thought for 6 years. Now it all backfired right in my face and back to the drawing board. My son is in 4th grade. He's made many, many friends there, which all children do. But now my plan originally done. North Penn has done it to me again. They're putting my child back over to Knapp Elementary because where we live is not a convenient spot, because we are in between. We're 4 minutes from Windnor and we're 4 minutes from Knapp Elementary. I'm smack in the middle, but my child has to suffer for it. And I would like anybody on the board, please, to explain to him, because I can't. He has many, many questions that I can't answer. He wants to know why he can't stay in his school. He wants to know why he's being like a ping pong ball back and forth. I would like any of you to explain to my child why he can't stay in his school.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Good evening, and Happy New Year, and thank you for giving us a chance to talk. Paul Lapotin, 101 Turwood Lane in Montgomery Township. I'm here about Bridle Path. Last time I was here last month, and I've also been to most of the meetings. I'm the one who has an 8-year-old second grader who's the only female that's being transferred to Knapp. But I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here basically to talk about numbers. We've done a lot of work in the past month trying to get this thing corrected. And I have to laugh because I know the committee did a lot of work. I know the committee tried hard. And the committee trying to be fair in a lot of ways. But the committee's own numbers don't add up. And that has me annoyed because I'm looking at the sheet, at 2 sheets here. One that was given out in December, which is their proposal. And I'm looking at Bridle Path. And it talks about, based on this new plan, if we're pulled out, what your capacity numbers will be. And then I look at this one that was handed out today, telling me what the numbers are for this year. And your numbers, and then you add us in, we're 38 students as of next year. We then drop off to, based on your own numbers, we'll drop off to 34, we'll drop off to like 29, we drop off to like 24. You're showing a difference of next year 44. This is between the 2 numbers you're giving us, the 729 and the 685, 44, 43, 44, 44, 46. Where are those numbers coming from? Where are those additional kids? We're going downwards. We're not going upwards. And this is right off the sheet. I'm not making this up. Okay, look at December.
You're comparing page 7 from the original.
Look at December 7.
To which ones?
Okay, under Bridle Path Elementary School capacity 725, you see here 685, 683. I mean, these are your numbers.
Right.
All right. Then you go over to today's paper, and you're saying 729, 726, 725. Now subtract those 2 numbers. You get differences of 44, 43, 44, 44, 46.
Right.
What are those numbers?
Some of that has to do, obviously the 38 is a factor in there.
Yeah, we're this year. Then we go down.
Some of those numbers have to do with the fact that we use straight line projections.
Okay.
And the kindergarten enrollment becomes the base year. Therefore, when you project the kindergarten out with the 10% for first grade, and all of this was done according to the way we explained.
Right, I understand that.
That you end up with numbers higher than that, and that's based upon that information. And that, again, it has to do with an establishment of what kind of numbers you're going to get in first grade, and that's based on where you are today. So
fine.
That's the explanation for it. You're right. It doesn't add up.
It doesn't add up. Let's be honest. Straight line is out the door. It doesn't add up. Look at your own numbers from 6th grade down to first grade. 6th grade, 5th, 4th, 3rd, 2nd, it's going down. We had 1 year, this year, where it went up. Now, is that a trend? In business, 5 years in a row going down is a trend going down. 1 year is not a trend going up. 1 year tells me we had a different year. Doesn't mean we have a trend going up. So you're automatically stating because we had 1 year where we jumped up 10 kids, that from now on, it's going to be that rate the whole way through. When you know, once you take out Cambridge and Knoll, you will have no new housing developments in our area. You will have, other than people moving in, moving out, where is the growth in our area? There is none. And that's the point I've been saying since day one. You pull a new development out, and there is no new growth. So where are you getting these new kids? Every school has kids moving in and moving out every semester. That you can't control, all right? And basically, that's it. I mean, I can't understand where these numbers come from. I want to thank the board members who asked to have us added. And for the record, Vicki, we're only 4 over, not per grade, 4 for the school. That's less than, and we have 30 classes in Bridle Path. You figure the numbers. We're 1 child per classroom. Now, 1 child per classroom at Bridle Path is really going to affect the school, then you know what? I'm in the wrong business. Because I can't understand why 1 kid is going to affect the numbers. We're 4 kids and we're going down.
I know, but as I said,
That's not,
it's that there's so many, each of these little areas have a similar.
I agree. I understand that. I agree with that. But you have to realize, you can't allow, there has to be changes made. You can't just, no plan goes through 100% in any area. Go ahead.
I hope that in the future, when your child's not there, that if you're sitting in a school that's at 750 at capacity, that it doesn't, you don't think there's something wrong with the district when Gwinnett Square sits there with 550.
But we're not going to be, but your own numbers will never get to 750.
This is not an easy job.
Oh, I know it's not. Honestly, I wish I could have gotten involved with this thing 6 months ago. This is not, we're not over capacity at Bridle Path. We really aren't.
All right, I'm gonna cut you off. I think you made your point.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening, and thank you again for this opportunity. Again, I'd like to recognize the committee for the amount of time and hours they've spent on this particular project. I'm Jean Marie Meisel, 6104 Rolling Hill Drive, Montgomery Township. I live in the Gwinnett Point development. I gave some history to the committee at the last meeting that Gwinnett Point has 440 townhomes. We are also being looked at by the committee clumped with the Montgomery Commons condominium development that runs along Bell Run Boulevard. A guesstimate is that there are, I think, 600 or better condominiums in that condominium development. We contribute, at this date, 39. I know you had 40, but we lost 1 child. I'm counting them all. But we're talking almost 900 homes, and we're contributing 39 students. And I'll tell you how that affects my children. I live on a street with 30 townhouses, and we have about 10 children. But there are other cul-de-sacs that have no children that come to any of the North Penn schools. We are predominantly a professional attracted neighborhood. We have professionals that move in and move out. We are many first-time homeowners that may start their young families and leave. We have constant turnover. I have yet to see anyone move in with more than 2 children that are older than 2nd grade. And if they do move in, usually they are in rental properties because some of those homes are investment properties for their owners. I have a 1st grader and a 2nd grader, and a couple of things that are making me very uncomfortable is particularly for my 1st grader. Yes, Gwinnett Point has been, this is the 3rd time we're being considered to be moved. That's right, we have not had any children affected in the last 5 years, but I did contact those people that were affected that have since moved. And they reminded me that when they were considered the 1st time, they came to the board and asked to stay. And the wish was granted, it was 7 children. But the following year, they were approached again and told they were going to move from Knapp to Gwynn Nor. 3 of those families opted to leave, leaving out of 7 children, 2 children that attended Gwynn Nor from that movement. What that did to the Gwinnett Point development, I'll tell you. It decreased our property value because 2 of those 3 homes sold for about $15,000 to $20,000 less than what the original asking price was for the property. Because these people opted to get out. They did not want their children to be in an area where they were going to be moved. So here we are again. How will this affect? It will affect my children. It will affect my 1st grader. I'm feeling very insecure that my child now will continue at Knapp till 6th grade. If you're telling me we have a 5-year shelf plan, how am I going to tell my 1st grader, guess what, when you get to 6th grade, it might not happen. You might go back to Gwynn Nor. And I think when you're considering a grandfather clause perhaps for today's 5th graders, are you going to set a precedent that this is going to be what you're going to do for future redistrictings?
No, I think we're trying to address this particular problem, this particular issue, be as sensitive as we can, and still address the problems that we have with the crowding in the schools.
So my son, I have to tell him to cope with this. Is that what you're
I'd
telling
like
me?
to be able to guarantee you that we would do that.
But
I
I'm just
certainly
saying, if you're
can't.
setting a precedent, I would be real careful. I feel for those kids that are going into 6th grade next year, but I'm also being very selfish and worrying about my 1st grader. What I have here is the Gwynnor Elementary School Directory, and I went through it. And Mrs. Shear, I thank you for your sensitivity, because I went through and I starred children from our development. Well, to my surprise, my son has one other child in his classroom, but the child that lives in Montgomery Commons. I don't know this child. This is not somebody my son plays with. This child is some 700 homes away from my son. When you go through this directory, at the most, there's 4 children from these 2 developments in one classroom. There's 1, there's 2, there's 3. There's some classrooms with no children from our development. So I want you to please, in your heart of hearts, see how, as Mrs. Shear indicated, these little islands that we're looking at in moving and redistricting, we are taking these small, insecure pockets when we know that there are communities that are grounded where the movement isn't as great and the shifting isn't as great. Have children go to school with kids that live in their connecting yard that's 3 doors away. My children don't have that in our development. They have no continuity. Their community is Gwynnor. Thank you.
With that, I want to, I think we've covered all the items we wanted to do tonight. The item will be on the agenda on the week from Thursday. And with that, I need a motion to adjourn.